What does it mean to walk into the shadow, knowing the light may never return, to tread a path where hope is but a whisper, and courage a flickering ember in the heart, in the ancient lays of Middle-earth, where stars burned brighter, and the earth trembled with the weight of destiny? There is a tale that speaks to this question, a tale of a man mortal and frail who dared to face the terrors of Angband, the iron hell of Morgoth, the first Dark Lord. His name was Beren, son of J.R.R, and his story is not merely one of deeds, but of the soul's quiet wrestling with fear, burden, and the unyielding call of love. Let us walk with him now, not as historians or scribes, but as wanderers in a dream seeking the truths that lie hidden in the shadows of his journey. In the beginning, there was a silence, not the gentle hush of a forest at dawn, but a silence born of ruin. Dorthonion, once a land of rolling hills and whispering pines, had fallen. Its rivers ran red with the blood of men, its skies choked with the smoke of burning homes. The house of J.R.R, proud and steadfast, was scattered, and Beren, last of his kin, wandered alone. Picture him there, a man of no great stature, his cloak torn, his eyes haunted by the faces of the fallen, his father J.R.R, whose ring he now bore a heavy circle of gold and emerald, a legacy not of power but of promises kept. The ring was a symbol, yes, but also a burden, for it bound him to a past he could not reclaim and a future he could not yet see. What does it mean to be the last to carry the weight of a name when all who knew it are gone? Beren's heart was not forged in the fires of ambition, nor tempered by the dreams of glory. He was no king, no hero clad in shining mail. He was a man, and in his solitude he knew fear, not the sharp panic of battle, but the slow, creeping dread that gnaws at the soul in the watches of the night. Fear whispered to him as he hid in the caves of Dorthonion, pursued by Morgoth's hunters orcs, with eyes like burning coals wolves that howled beneath a moonless sky. Fear told him to flee, to abandon the land of his fathers, to seek safety in the south where the sun still shone and the rivers sang. But Beren did not flee. Why, what held him fast when all reason bade him run? It was not courage, not yet. Courage is not the absence of fear, but the choice to walk through it. And Beren's choice was born of something deeper, a fidelity to the memory of those he had lost. To flee would be to betray them, to let their deaths become mere echoes in a forgotten song. So he remained a shadow among shadows, striking where he could, a thorn in the side of Morgoth's dominion. The orcs named him One Hand, for they feared his stealth, his blade that came unseen. But to Beren each strike was not a victory, but a defiance, a cry into the void that he was still here, still alive, still unbroken. Yet the shadow grew. Morgoth's power was not merely in his armies, but in the despair he wove into the air, a miasma that choked hope and turned hearts to stone. Dorthonion became a wasteland, its beauty defiled, its silence no longer sacred but oppressive. Beren's defiance could not hold back the tide. The caves grew colder, the stars dimmer, and the ring upon his finger seemed to grow heavier, as if it carried not only the oath of his fathers, but the weight of their unfulfilled dreams. He was alone, and the solitude was a wound deeper than any blade could cut. And then a vision came, not in waking, but in the half-light of a dream. A figure clad in silver, her hair like a river of starlight, her eyes holding the depth of the heavens. Lúthien, daughter of Thingol, and Melian, princess of Doriath, a being of such grace that the world seemed to pause in her presence. Beren saw her in the glades of Neldareth, dancing beneath the beech trees, her voice a melody that stirred the leaves and silenced the sorrow in his heart. Was it fate, was it grace, or was it the hand of Ilúvatar weaving a thread of light into the tapestry of his darkness? Whatever it was, it changed him. For the first time, Beren felt not the weight of loss, but the pull of something greater, a longing that was both pain and promise. Love in the tales of old is not a fleeting warmth, but a force that reshapes the soul. To love Lúthien was to love the stars themselves, to yearn for a light that could never be fully grasped. Yet Beren did not hesitate. He stepped from the shadows, his heart laid bare, and called her name Tinuviel Nightingale, for her voice was a song that pierced the night. She turned, and in her gaze he saw not pity, but recognition, as if she too had been waiting, as if their meeting was a note in a melody older than the world. But love, like all sacred things, comes with a price. Lúthien was no mortal maid, but an mortal born of a Mia and an elf king, her life woven into the fabric of Arda's undying beauty. Beren was a man, his years fleeting, his body frail. To love her was to court impossibility, to stand before a chasm that no bridge could span. And yet he did not falter. Why? Because love in its truest form does not seek possession but surrender. Beren did not dream of claiming Lúthien, but of offering himself, his brokenness, his fear, his fleeting life to her light. Their meeting was not the end of his trials, but the beginning of a greater journey. For love, once kindled, demands a path, and the path it set before Beren was one of terror and shadow. Lúthien's father Thingol, king of Doriath, was no gentle lord. His love for his daughter was a fortress unyielding and fierce. When Beren came before him, a wanderer with no crown, no army, only the ring of Barahir and the fire of his heart, Thingol's laughter was cold. "A mortal," he said, "dares to seek the hand of my daughter. Very well, bring me a Silmaril from the crown of Morgoth, and then we shall speak of love." The court of Doriath fell silent. The Silmaril, a jewel of divine light forged by Feanor, stolen by Morgoth, and set in his iron crown, was no mere treasure. It was a symbol of the world's first wound, the rebellion of the Noldor, the fall of the two trees. To seek it was to seek the heart of Morgoth's power, to walk into Angband itself, where no man had ever returned. Thingol's demand was not a quest, but a sentence of death, a cruel jest to rid himself of this insolent mortal. Yet Beren did not flinch. He looked into Thingol's eyes, and his voice was steady. "When we meet again, my hand shall hold a Silmaril." Was it madness, pride, or was it faith not in himself, but in the love that had brought him here, the love that had made the impossible seem not only possible, but necessary? For Beren, the Silmaril was not a prize, but a proof that love could defy even the darkness of Morgoth's throne. And so he set out. Alone at first, for the road to Angband was not one that others could tread. The forests of Doriath gave way to the wilds of Nandungorthab, the valley of dreadful death, where the spawn of Ungoliant wove webs of shadow and venom. Here the air was thick with fear, not the fear of blades or beasts, but the fear of losing oneself, of becoming unmoored from all that is good. Beren walked through this valley, his heart a battleground. The ring on his finger, the memory of Lúthien's song. The weight of Thingol's demand, they pressed upon him, each a thread in the tapestry of his fate. What is fear, if not the voice that tells us we are not enough? In Nandungorthab, fear was not an enemy to be slain, but a companion to be endured. Beren's steps faltered, his breath grew ragged, but he did not turn back. For what is a man if not a creature of choices? And Beren chose to go on, not because he believed himself strong, but because he believed in the light. He carried the light of Lúthien's eyes, the light of a love that was greater than his fear. The valley was not empty. Shadows moved in the mist, and eyes gleamed in the dark. The spider's children of Ungoliant whispered to him their voices like a chorus of despair. "Turn back," they hissed. "You are nothing. A mortal, frail and fleeting. What can you do against the might of Morgoth?" Beren's hand tightened on his sword, but he did not answer. Silence was his shield, not the silence of defeat, but the silence of resolve. He struck where he could, his blade, a flicker of defiance, and when the spiders closed in, he sang not a song of war, but a song of Dorthonion, of the hills and rivers he had loved, of the stars that still burned above the shadow. And then a miracle. From the darkness came a light, not the harsh glare of fire, but the soft radiance of starlight. Lúthien appeared cloaked in shadow, yet shining like a beacon. She had followed him, defying her father, defying the laws of her people, defying the very order of the world. Her presence was a rebuke to the darkness, her song, a blade that cut through the webs of Nan Dungortheb. The spiders fled, and for a moment the valley was still. Beren fell to his knees, not in worship, but in awe. "Why," he asked, his voice raw, "why have you come? This is my burden, my doom." Lúthien's answer was simple, yet it carried the weight of eternity. "Your doom is mine," she said, "for I love you, and love does not stand apart." In that moment, Beren understood that love is not a solitary flame, but a fire, shared a fire that grows brighter when two hearts bear it together. Together, they walked on, no longer a man alone, but a fellowship of two, bound by a love that was both their strength and their vulnerability. The road to Angband was still before them, its terrors undiminished, but now they faced it as one. Lúthien's power was not in her immortality, but in her choice to bind her fate to a mortal, to step into the shadow for the sake of love. And Beren's strength was not in his sword, but in his heart, which had dared to love what seemed impossible. What does it mean to face the terrors of Angband? It is not to seek glory nor to defy death, but to walk forward step by step, carrying the light of love through the darkness. For Beren, the journey was not about the Silmaril, nor even about proving himself to Thingol. It was about fidelity to Lúthien, to his father's ring, to the quiet truth that had stirred in his heart when he first saw her dancing under the stars. That truth was his guide, his shield, his song. And so they went on into the north, where the mountains loomed like the teeth of a great beast, and the air grew heavy with the malice of Morgoth. The gates of Angband were still far, but their shadow was already upon them. Fear walked with them, and doubt, and the weight of a world that seemed to conspire against their hope. Yet they walked hand in hand, a mortal and an immortal, two sparks of light in a sea of shadow. The tale does not end here, for the terrors of Angband are not so easily faced. But let us pause not to rest, but to listen to the silence that follows a song, to the heartbeat of a man who dares to love, to the whisper of a truth that is older than the stars. Beren's journey is ours in its way, for we too walk paths of shadow, bearing burdens we did not choose, seeking lights we cannot fully grasp. And like Beren, we are not alone, not if we dare to love, not if we dare to hope. The north wind howls a voice of iron and ash, carrying the breath of Angband's forges across the desolate plains of Anfoglith. Beren and Lúthien walk on their steps, a quiet rebellion against the vastness of the shadow that looms before them. The mountains of Thangorodrim rise in the distance, jagged and cruel, their peaks wreathed in smoke that chokes the stars. The air is heavy, not with the weight of winter, but with a malice that seeps into the bones, whispering of despair, of futility, of the inevitability of Morgoth's dominion. Yet the two walk hand in hand, a mortal man and an elven maiden, their love a fragile flame in a world that seeks to snuff it out. What does it mean to press forward when the heart trembles, when the path leads to a gate that no living soul has passed and returned? Let us follow them not as mere witnesses, but as companions in their silent song, seeking the truths that flicker in the darkness. The journey from Nan Dungortheb had changed them. Beren, once a lone wanderer, now bore the weight of Lúthien's presence, not as a burden, but as a sacred trust. Her choice to follow him, to bind her fate to his, was a gift he could scarcely comprehend. Yet it was also a mirror reflecting his own frailty. He was mortal, his years a fleeting breath compared to her eternity. Each step toward Angband was a step closer to his own end, and the thought gnawed at him not for his own sake, but for hers. What right had he to draw her into this doom, to let her starlight be dimmed by the shadow of his quest? Lúthien, for her part, walked with a grace that belied the terror of their path. Her eyes deep as the pools of Ivren held no fear, only a quiet resolve, as if she saw beyond the mountains, beyond the gates, to a truth that Beren could only dimly perceive. The land they crossed was no longer the green earth of Beleriand, and Foglith, the gasping dust, stretched before them, a wasteland of ash and bone where once the fields of Ardgallen had bloomed. Here Morgoth's wrath had scorched the earth, leaving only a scar upon the world. The ground crunched beneath their feet, each step stirring clouds of dust that clung to their cloaks and stung their eyes. No bird sang, no river murmured. The silence was not the silence of peace, but of absence, as if the world itself had forgotten how to hope. Beren's hand tightened on the hilt of his sword, not for courage but for comfort, a reminder of the world he had known, where steel could still answer shadow. What is temptation, if not the voice that offers escape? As they walked, the wasteland spoke to Beren not in words, but in the slow erosion of his will. "Turn back," it whispered. "You are but a man, and she a star you cannot hold. Let her return to Doriath, to the safety of her father's halls. Let the Silmaril remain in Morgoth's crown for what is one jewel against the tide of darkness." The temptation was not cowardice, but reason cloaked in the guise of love. To turn back would spare Lúthien, spare them both the horrors that waited. Yet Beren did not speak these thoughts aloud, for to voice them would be to give them power, and he knew in the quiet of his heart that love does not flee from sacrifice. Lúthien's hand in his was a tether, a reminder that their path was shared, and to abandon it would be to betray not only himself, but her. Lúthien, too, felt the weight of the wasteland. Her power, born of Melion's divine lineage, was a light that could pierce shadow, but here in the heart of Morgoth's desolation, that light seemed to flicker. She sang softly as they walked, not the bold songs of Doriath, but a melody of memory of starlit glades, of the laughter of rivers, of the first moment she had seen Beren in the woods of Neldoreth. Her song was not for defiance, but for endurance, a thread of beauty woven into the fabric of despair. Beren listened, and the sound was a balm, not erasing his fear, but giving him the strength to carry it. Her voice was a reminder that beauty once glimpsed cannot be unmade, no matter how deep the shadow falls. But the wasteland was not empty. From the dust rose shapes, wolves, their eyes glowing with a fell light, their jaws dripping with hunger. These were no mere beasts, but creatures of Morgoth, twisted by his will, their forms a mockery of life. Beren drew his sword, its blade a faint gleam in the gloom, and Lúthien stepped beside him, her cloak falling away to reveal the radiance of her spirit. The wolves circled their growls, a chorus of malice, but Lúthien raised her voice, and her song became a command, a power that bound the air itself. The wolves faltered, their eyes dimming, and one by one they slunk back into the dust, unable to withstand her light. Beren watched, his heart torn between awe and sorrow, for he saw the cost of her power, the weariness that touched her face, the shadow that lingered in her eyes. They pressed on the mountains, growing closer, their slopes littered with the bones of those who had dared to challenge Morgoth's might. The air grew colder, the malice thicker, and Beren felt the ring of Barahir heavy on his finger, its emerald no longer a symbol of hope, but a reminder of the oaths that had led him here. His father's voice echoed in his memory, not in words, but in the weight of expectation to be steadfast, to be true, to carry the legacy of the House of Beor. Yet what legacy could survive Angband? What oath could stand against the one who had sundered the world? It was here, in the shadow of Thangorodrim, that they met him, Finrod Felagund, king of Nargothrond, bearer of the same ring that Beren wore. Finrod, golden-haired and wise, had come with a small company drawn by the whispers of Beren's quest. The ring, a token of friendship between Barahir and Finrod, had called him, and now he stood before them, his eyes filled with both sorrow and resolve. "You seek the Silmaril," he said, his voice soft, yet carrying the weight of ages. and I am bound by oath to aid you, for your father saved my life, and this ring is the seal of that debt." Beren knelt, not as a beggar, but as one who recognizes a gift unearned. Finrod's presence was a light in the darkness, a reminder that even in the shadow of Angband fidelity endures. But Lúthien's face was troubled, for she saw the cost of Finrod's oath, a king risking his throne, his people, his life for a quest that seemed doomed. "This is my burden," she said, her voice a plea. "Do not bind yourself to our doom." But Finrod smiled a smile that held both joy and sorrow. "Doom is not a chain, but a choice," he said, "and I choose to walk with you for love and honor, demand no less." What is legacy, if not the echo of choices made? Finrod's decision was not born of duty alone, but of a deeper truth, that to stand with the weak, to share in their peril, is to weave one's life into the song of the world. Beren felt the weight of this truth, for Finrod's choice made his own path both heavier and lighter. Heavier, for now another bore the cost of his quest. Lighter, for he was no longer alone. Lúthien, too, felt the shift, her heart torn between gratitude and fear, for she knew that Finrod's light, like her own, would be tested in the fires of Angband. Together they devised a plan not of force, but of guile. Angband's gates were guarded by powers no sword could overcome, but Lúthien's arts, born of Melion's lineage, could weave illusions to deceive even the eyes of Morgoth's servants. She wove cloaks of shadow not to hide them, but to transform them, Beren and Finrod, into orcs, their forms twisted and foul, their faces unrecognizable. Lúthien herself took the guise of a vampire, a creature of night, her beauty veiled in terror. The act was a wound to her spirit, for to wear the form of darkness was to feel its weight, to taste its despair. Yet she did not falter, for love is not only a light, but a fire that burns through sacrifice. They approached the gates of Angband, a maw of iron and stone flanked by towers that seemed to pierce the sky. The air was thick with the stench of sulfur, the ground trembling with the pulse of Morgoth's forges. Beren's heart pounded not with the sharp fear of battle, but with the dread of standing before a power that had broken gods. Finrod walked beside him, his orc guise hiding the light of his spirit, but Beren could feel it, a warmth that steadied his steps. Lúthien, in her vampire form, moved with a grace that belied her terror, her eyes fixed on the gate as if she could will it to open. But the gate was not unguarded. From the shadows came a presence vast and terrible, Sauron, Morgoth's lieutenant, the Lord of Wolves. His eyes, burning with a cold fire, pierced their disguises, and his voice was a blade cutting through the air. "Who are you that dare to tread in my master's realm?" he demanded. Beren felt his knees weaken, not from fear of death, but from the weight of Sauron's will, a force that sought to unmake him. Finrod stepped forward, his voice steady, weaving a tale of orcs sent on a secret errand. But Sauron's laughter was a storm shaking the earth. "You are no orcs," he said, "and you shall not pass. What is faith, if not the refusal to yield?" Finrod did not draw a sword, but raised his voice in song, a song of Valinor, of the two trees, of the light that was before the world's wounding. The air shimmered, the shadows recoiled, and for a moment it seemed that Sauron's power would break. But Sauron answered his own song, a dirge of despair, of chains and fire, of the inevitable triumph of darkness. The duel was not of blades, but of wills, and it shook the foundations of Angband. Beren and Lúthien stood frozen, their hearts caught in the clash of light and shadow. Finrod's song faltered not for lack of strength, but for the weight of his oath, which bound him to a mortal's doom. Sauron's power surged, and Finrod fell. His guise shattered, his light dimmed, but not extinguished. Sauron turned to Beren and Lúthien, his eyes stripping away their disguises, a man and an elf. He mused, his voice dripping with contempt. "And for what? A jewel, a dream. You are moths fluttering toward a flame that will consume you." Beren's hand reached for Lúthien's, not for strength, but for solace, for in Sauron's gaze he saw the truth of his own frailty. But Lúthien stepped forward, her vampire guise falling away, her radiance unveiled. "We are here for love," she said, her voice a melody that cut through Sauron's scorn. "And love is a flame that you cannot quench." Sauron laughed, but there was unease in his eyes. For Lúthien's power was not of swords or spells, but of a truth that even he could not deny. He bound them not with chains, but with his will, and cast them into a pit beneath Tol in Gaurhoth, his tower of wolves. The darkness was absolute, the air thick with the stench of decay. Beren held Lúthien close, his heart a tumult of guilt and love. "I have brought you to this," he whispered. But Lúthien's voice was steady, a star in the void. "We have brought ourselves," she said, "and we are not yet lost." The pit was a place of silence, not the silence of peace, but of waiting, of the slow drip of time that erodes hope. Finrod, bound nearby, spoke softly, his voice a thread of light. "Do not despair," he said, "for even in the darkest pit the song of Ilúvatar endures." Beren listened, and though his heart was heavy, he felt a stirring not of courage, but of trust, not in himself, but in the love that had led them here, in the light that Lúthien carried, in the oath that Finrod bore. The terrors of Angband were not behind them, but within them, and yet they were not alone. The tale does not pause, for the shadow of Angband is a tide that does not recede. Beren, Lúthien, and Finrod lie in the pit, their fates entwine their hearts, a fragile defiance against the darkness. What lies ahead is not a promise of victory, but a question: can love, can faith, can the quiet strength of a mortal heart withstand the fires of Morgoth's wrath? Let us hold this question not as a puzzle to be solved, but as a melody to be sung as we walk with them into the heart of the shadow. The pit beneath Tol in Gaurhoth is a void, a place where light is not forgotten, but forbidden, where the air itself seems to conspire against hope. Beren, Lúthien, and Finrod lie bound in its depths, their bodies pressed against cold stone, their hearts caught in the slow drip of time that measures not hours but endurance. The darkness is not merely an absence of sight, but a presence heavy and alive, whispering of defeat, of the futility of their quest, of the inevitability of Morgoth's triumph. Yet within this abyss there is a flicker, a touch of hands, a murmured song, a shared breath that defies the shadow. What does it mean to hold fast when all is lost, when the terrors of Angband are not only without, but within? Let us linger here, not as judges of their fate, but as listeners to their silent music, seeking the truths that pulse in the heart of despair. The pit is a crucible, forging not heroes but souls. Beren feels the weight of his mortality more keenly now, each breath a reminder of his fleeting years. The ring of Barahir still upon his finger is no longer a symbol of legacy, but a tether to a world that seems impossibly distant. The hills of Dorthonion, the laughter of his kin, the starlit glades where he first saw Lúthien. His mind wanders to her now, not as a distant dream, but as the woman beside him, her warmth a quiet miracle in the cold. He cannot see her face, but he knows its lines, the curve of her lips, the depth of her eyes that hold both eternity and sorrow. To love her here in this place of unmaking is to love not only her light but her fragility, for even Lúthien, daughter of Melian, is not untouched by fear. Fear is no longer a whisper but a chorus singing of his inadequacy. "You are a man," it says, frail and fleeting, a spark in the wind. "What can you do against the might of Sauron, against the will of Morgoth? You have led her to this pit, this doom, and for what? A jewel, a vow." Beren's heart aches not for himself, but for Lúthien, whose choice to follow him has brought her here, to this place where even her radiance seems to falter. He reaches for her hand, his fingers trembling, and finds hers steady, not with the strength of immortality, but with the resolve of love. "Forgive me," he whispers, his voice barely a breath, But Lúthien's answer is a song soft and unyielding, a melody that weaves through the darkness like a thread of silver. There is no forgiveness needed, she sings, for we are one and this path is ours. Finrod, bound nearby, listens to their voices, and his heart is both lifted and pierced. He is a king, a son of the Noldor, whose life has been woven with oaths of loyalty to his people, of friendship to Barahir, of defiance against Morgoth. Yet here in the pit he is no king, only a man stripped of crown and power, his light dimmed by Sauron's sorcery. The duel of song still echoes in his mind, the clash of his will against Sauron's, the moment when his voice faltered not for lack of strength, but for the weight of his choices. To aid Beren is to risk all his throne, his people the fragile hope of Nargothrond. Yet Finrod does not regret his oath, for what is a king, if not a servant of truth? His voice joins Lúthien's not in power, but in memory, singing of Valinor, of the two trees, of a light that endures beyond the shadow. What is loss, if not the surrender of what was once held dear? In the pit, loss is not an event, but a state, a slow unraveling of the self. Beren loses the illusion of his strength, the belief that he alone could bear this burden. Lúthien loses the untouchable grace of her immortality, feeling the weight of mortal peril in her bones. Finrod loses the certainty of his kingship, the dream that his wisdom could shield his people from the coming storm. Yet in this loss there is a strange alchemy, a forging of something new, not courage, not yet, but a shared vulnerability, a recognition that they are bound not by strength, but by their willingness to break. The pit is not silent. From the shadows come sounds, growls, low and guttural, the scrape of claws on stone. Sauron's wolves prowl the darkness, their eyes like embers, their hunger a mirror of their master's malice. One by one, Finrod's companions, the warriors who followed him from Nargothrond, are taken. Their cries are brief, swallowed by the void, but each is a wound to those who remain. Beren feels the guilt like a blade, for these men died for his quest, their blood a debt he cannot repay. Finrod, their king, bears the deeper wound, for he led them here, his oath, their doom. Lúthien sings for them, her voice a lament that carries their names into the dark, a promise that they will not be forgotten. And then the wolves come for Finrod. A great beast, its jaws dripping with shadow, looms over him, its breath hot and foul. Beren struggles against his bonds, his voice a raw cry, but Finrod's eyes are calm, his face lit with a quiet resolve. Stay, he says, not as a command, but as a gift. The wolf lunges, and Finrod fights not with a sword, but with his hands, his body, his spirit. It is no battle of glory, but of sacrifice, a king giving himself to save those he loves. The wolf falls, its body broken, but Finrod falls too, his light fading, his breath a whisper. Beren, he murmurs, carry the ring, carry the light, and then he is gone, his soul passing to the halls of Mandos, leaving only silence. What is sacrifice, if not the giving of self for another Finrod's death? Is not a defeat, but a victory, not of power, but of love. Beren weeps not for the king, but for the man whose friendship was a light he did not deserve. Lúthien's song falters, her voice breaking, but she does not stop, for to sing is to honor, to weave Finrod's name into the tapestry of the world. The pit is darker now, the air heavier, but Beren feels a shift within him, not strength, but purpose. Finrod's sacrifice is a call not to glory, but to fidelity to the truth that love is worth the cost. Yet the pit is not the end. From above comes a sound not of wolves, but of thunder, a roar that shakes the stone. Huan, the great hound of Valinor, has come drawn by Lúthien's song, his heart bound to her fate. With him is a power unspoken, a grace that pierces the shadow. Sauron's tower trembles, his wolves flee, and the pit is opened. Beren and Lúthien are lifted from the dark, their bodies weak, but their spirits unbroken. Huan stands before them, his eyes like stars, his presence a reminder that even in the heart of despair, the world is not wholly forsaken. They stand now on the Isle of Tolkien Middle-earth, the air thick with the stench of Sauron's sorcery. Lúthien's voice rises, not in lament but in command, a song that binds the air and shakes the tower's foundations. Sauron, the Lord of Wolves, comes forth, his form a terror of shadow and flame, but Lúthien's light is a blade cutting through his power. He falters, his will bending, and Huan seizes him, his jaws of vice. Sauron yields, his spirit fleeing in the form of a bat, leaving the tower to crumble. The isle is freed, its prisoners released, but Beren and Lúthien know that their path lies not in victory, but in the shadow still ahead. What is hope, if not the refusal to let darkness have the final word? The fall of Tolkien Middle-earth is not the end of their quest, but a moment of grace, a breath in the song that carries them forward. Beren looks to Lúthien, her face pale but radiant, and sees not only the woman he loves, but the truth she carries, that love is a power greater than sorcery, greater than fear. The ring on his finger, Finrod's ring, is heavy with loss, but also with promise, a reminder that their story is not theirs alone, but part of a greater melody. They turn now to the north, to the gates of Angband itself. The mountains of Thangorodrim loom, their peaks wreathed in fire, their slopes a graveyard of hope. Beren feels the weight of the Silmaril, not as a jewel, but as a symbol of all that has been lost. His father, his home, Finrod's light. Yet he feels also the weight of Lúthien's hand, the warmth of her presence, the song that binds them. The terrors of Angband are not behind them, but before them, and they walk toward them not as heroes, but as lovers, their hearts a quiet defiance against the dark. The road is narrow now, the air thick with the malice of Morgoth. Beren's sword is heavy, his body weary, but his spirit is alight, not with the fire of battle, but with the glow of fidelity to Lúthien, to Finrod, to the truth that love is a flame that burns through shadow. Lúthien walks beside him, her cloak tattered, her voice soft but unyielding, a song that carries the memory of stars, of rivers, of a world that is not yet lost. Huan follows his steps, a silent promise, his heart a shield. What does it mean to face the terrors of Angband? It is not to conquer fear, but to carry it, to let it walk beside you as a companion, not a master. It is to lose what is dear, homekin, certainty, and to find in that loss a deeper truth. It is to love not as a dream, but as a choice, a fire that burns through sacrifice. Beren and Lúthien are not yet at the gates, but they are closer, their steps, a melody, their hearts, a song that echoes in the silence. The tale does not pause, for the shadow of Angband is a tide that does not recede. Let us walk with them, not to seek an end, but to listen to the heartbeat of a man who dares to love, to the song of a maiden who defies the dark, to the silence that follows a king's sacrifice. Their story is ours in its way, for we, too, face pits of despair, carrying lights we fear to lose, singing songs we hope will endure. And like Beren and Lúthien, we are not alone, not if we dare to hope, not if we dare to love. The mountains of Thangorodrim loom like the jagged edge of a broken world, their peaks wreathed in fire and shadow, their slopes a testament to Morgoth's dominion. Beren and Lúthien stand at the threshold of Angband, the iron gates yawning before them, a maw of stone and malice that swallows light and hope alike. Huan, the great hound of Valinor, lingers at their side, his eyes gleaming with the silent vow, his presence a final gift before the plunge into the abyss. The air is thick with the stench of sulfur, the ground trembling with the pulse of forges deep within the earth. Here at the heart of Morgoth's power, the world seems to hold its breath as if waiting for the song of two souls to falter or endure. What does it mean to stand before the darkness, not as conquerors but as bearers of a fragile light, Let us walk with them not as seekers of triumph, but as witnesses to their quiet defiance, listening for the truths that whisper in the shadows' embrace. The journey to this moment has been a tapestry of loss and love woven with threads of fear, sacrifice, and fidelity. Beren feels the weight of it all, the ring of Barahir, heavy with Finrod's sacrifice, the memory of Dorthonion, a land now lost, the Silmaril, a jewel that is not a prize but a proof, a testament to a love that dares to defy the impossible. His body is weary, his sword notched his heart, a battleground where doubt and devotion clash. Yet Lúthien's hand in his is a tether, her presence a melody that steadies his steps. She stands beside him, her cloak tattered, her face pale but radiant, her eyes holding a light that no shadow can quench. Huan, too, is a reminder of grace, his strength a shield, his loyalty a bridge between the mortal and the divine. What is silence, if not the space where the soul listens? As they approach the gates, the world grows quiet, not with the hush of peace, but with the weight of destiny. The clamor of Morgoth's forges fades, the growl of wolves recedes, and all that remains is the sound of their breathing, the soft tread of their feet, the unspoken vows that bind them. Beren looks to Lúthien, and in her gaze he sees not only the woman he loves, but the truth she carries, that love is not a shield against fear, but a fire that burns through it. He speaks no words, for none are needed. Their silence is a song, a shared resolve that speaks louder than any cry of defiance. The gates of Angband are not merely stone, but a presence carved with runes of dread, guarded by powers that no mortal blade can challenge. Beren feels their weight not as a barrier, but as a question, are you enough? His heart answers not with pride, but with honesty. I am not enough, but we are. Lúthien steps forward, her voice rising not in battle, but in enchantment, a song that weaves shadow and starlight into a cloak of illusion. She becomes Draulúin, the greatest of Morgoth's wolves, her form massive and terrible, her eyes glowing with a fell light. Beren, too, is transformed, his body cloaked in the guise of a werewolf. His hands now claws his heart, still his own. Huan watches his gaze, steady, and then he turns his role in this moment complete. His path diverging to guard the world they leave behind. The gates open not with a groan, but with a sigh, as if the stone itself yields to Lúthien's power. They step into Angband, and the darkness closes around them, a tide that seeks to drown their light. The halls are vast, carved from the roots of the earth, their walls glistening with veins of iron and fire. The air is hot, thick with the screams of unseen captives, the clang of hammers forging chains. Beren's heart pounds not with the sharp fear of battle, but with the dread of standing in the heart of evil, where hope is a memory and courage a fleeting dream. Yet Lúthien's presence is a beacon, her song, a thread that guides them through the labyrinth, her will, a shield against the malice that presses from all sides. What is temptation if not the voice that offers surrender? As they descend, the darkness speaks to Beren not in words, but in visions of Doriath's star-lit glades of a life, where he and Lúthien might live in peace, free from quests and dooms. Turn back, it whispers. The Silmaril is not worth your lives. Let Morgoth keep his jewel, let the world turn without you. The temptation is not cowardice, but love cloaked in the guise of wisdom. To turn back would spare Lúthien, spare them both the horrors that wait. Yet Beren does not falter, for he knows that love is not a retreat, but a forward motion, a choice to face the shadow for the sake of the light it guards. Lúthien's song, soft but unyielding, is his answer, a melody that drowns the darkness's lies. The halls of Angband are not empty. Shadows move in the gloom, orcs with eyes like burning coals, balrogs whose whips crack like thunder. Creatures of nightmare that slither and crawl, Yet Lúthien's illusion holds her power, bending the air, making their passage unseen. Beren marvels at her strength, but he sees also its cost. The weariness that touches her eyes, the strain in her voice as she weaves her spell. To wear the guise of darkness is to feel its weight, to taste its despair, and Lúthien bears this burden for them both. He longs to take it from her, to shield her with his own frail body, but he knows that love does not demand protection, but partnership. So he walks beside her, his werewolf guise, a mask his heart laid bare. They come at last to the throne room of Morgoth, a cavern vast as a fallen sky, its ceiling lost in shadow, its floor littered with the bones of the vanquished. At its heart sits Morgoth, the first Dark Lord, his form a mountain of iron and fire, his eyes burning with a hatred older than the world. Upon his head rests the iron crown, and within it the three Silmarils, their light a mockery of the two trees, their radiance twisted by his will. Beren feels his knees weaken, not from fear of death, but from the weight of Morgoth's presence, a force that seeks to unmake all that is good. Lúthien too feels the terror, but her song does not falter, her illusion holding fast, her eyes fixed on the crown. What is faith, if not the choice to act when all seems lost? Lúthien steps forward, her werewolf guise falling away, her true form unveiled, a vision of starlight, of grace, of a beauty that pierces the dark. Morgoth's eyes narrow, his malice stirred, but also his curiosity, for even he, in his corruption, cannot resist the pull of her light. "Who are you?" He rumbles his voice. "A storm that dares to stand before me." Lúthien does not answer with words, but with song, a melody that weaves sleep and shadow, a spell that binds the air itself. The throne room grows still, the orcs and balrogs swaying, their eyes dimming. Morgoth's will resists his power, a tide that threatens to drown her, but Lúthien's song is a river flowing through his defenses, lulling his spirit into a dream of dominion unbroken. Morgoth slumps upon his throne, his eyes closed, his crown tilting. Beren, still in his werewolf guise, moves forward, his heart a tumult of awe and terror. The Silmaril is within reach, its light a star. In the darkness, but to take it is to risk all. His hand trembles as he draws his knife, its blade a flicker of defiance against the iron crown. The metal is cold, unyielding, but the Silmaril comes free, its radiance spilling into his palm, a warmth that burns and heals in equal measure. For a moment he is lost in its light, in the memory of Lúthien's dance, of Finrod's sacrifice, of a world that might yet be. But the spell is fragile. Morgoth stirs, his eyes flickering, and Beren's greed for not one Silmaril, but all, betrays him. He reaches for another, his knife scraping the crown, and the blade snaps its fragment, grazing Morgoth's cheek. The Dark Lord wakes, his roar shaking the earth, his malice a fire that burns through Lúthien's spell. The throne room erupts, orcs and balrogs surging forward, their cries a chorus of wrath. Beren clutches the Silmaril, its light a brand in his hand, and Lúthien seizes his arm, her song now a cry, a desperate weave of shadow to shield them. What is burden, if not the weight of choices made? The Silmaril is theirs, but at a cost. Angband wakes its halls alive with pursuit, its gates closing like the jaws of a beast. Beren and Lúthien flee, their disguises gone, their bodies frail against the tide of Morgoth's wrath. Lúthien's song is a shield, but it falters, her strength ebbing, her light dimming. Beren feels the Silmaril's heat not as a treasure, but as a chain, a reminder of his failure, his greed, his frailty. Yet he runs not for himself, but for her, for the love that has brought them here, for the hope that still flickers in her eyes. The gates are near, but the shadow is nearer. J.R.R, the wolf of Angband, bred by Morgoth's hand, bars their path, his jaws gaping, his eyes burning with hunger. Beren raises the Silmaril, its light a challenge, but Carcharoth's malice is a void, swallowing the radiance. The wolf lunges, and Beren's arm is caught in its jaws, the Silmaril still in his grasp. Pain sears through him. A fire that blinds, but Lúthien's voice is a blade, her song. A command that drives Carcharoth back, his body writhing in torment. The gates open and they stumble into the night. Beren's arm a ruin, the Silmaril lost to the wolf's belly. Their victory a wound. They collapse in the shadow of Thangorodrim, their bodies broken, their hearts raw. Quan returns his presence, a grace, his strength, a shield, as he drives Carcharoth into the wilds. Lúthien kneels beside Beren, her hands trembling as she binds his wound, her song now a lament, a prayer for healing. The Silmaril is gone, but they are alive, their love, a fire that burns through pain. Beren looks to her, his vision fading, and sees not defeat, but fidelity, a woman who has walked through hell, for him a light that no darkness can extinguish. What does it mean to face the terrors of Angband? It's not to claim victory, but to endure, to carry the wounds of love through the shadow. Beren and Lúthien have faced the heart of evil, not as heroes, but as lovers, their hearts a song that defies the dark. The Silmaril is lost, but their story is not, for love is not a jewel to be held, but a melody to be sung, a light to be carried. They lie now in the dust, their breaths a shared rhythm, their hands entwined, the mountains silent above them. The tale does not end, for the shadow of Angband is a tide that ebbs but does not vanish. Let us linger with them, not to seek resolution, but to listen to the heartbeat of a man who dares to fail, to the song of a maiden who dares to love, to the silence that follows a wolf's retreat. Their story is ours in its way, for we too bear burdens. We cannot hold chase lights. We cannot grasp, sing songs we fear will fade. And like Beren and Lúthien, we are not alone, not if we dare to carry the light, not if we dare to sing. The dust of Anfoglith clings to their cloaks, a grey shroud over the wounds of their flight from Angband. Beren lies beneath the shadow of Thangorodrim, his body broken, his right arm a mangled ruin where Carcharoth's jaws tore flesh and bone, swallowing the Silmaril with it. Lúthien kneels beside him, her hands trembling as she weaves a song of healing, her voice a fragile thread of starlight in the dark. Huan the great hound stands guard, his eyes scanning the desolate plain, his presence a silent vow to shield them from the terrors that still hunt. The air is heavy with the aftertaste of Morgoth's malice, the ground scarred by the fires of their escape. Yet in this moment there is a stillness, not of peace, but of survival, of two souls clinging to the ember of their love against a world that seeks to snuff it out. What does it mean to carry on when the light is lost? When the terrors of Angband have left their mark, not only on the body, but on the soul? Let us walk with them, not as seekers of endings, but as bearers of their song, listening for the truths that linger in the silence of their wounds. Beren's breath is shallow. Each inhale a battle against the pain that sears his frame. The Silmaril, that radiant jewel of Fëanor's craft, is gone, entombed in the belly of Carcharoth, a bitter irony that gnaws at his heart. He had held it, felt its warmth, seen its light, a proof of his love, a defiance of Thingol's impossible demand. Now it is lost, and with it, the hope of fulfilling his vow. Yet the deeper wound is not the loss of the jewel, but the cost of their journey, Finrod's sacrifice. Lúthien's peril, the blood of those who fell in the shadow of Angband. His eyes, dim with fever, find Lúthien's face, and he sees not only her beauty, but her weariness, the toll of her songs, the weight of her choice, to bind her fate to a mortal's doom. I have failed you, he whispers, his voice a broken chord, but Lúthien's gaze is steady, her hand cool against his brow. You have not failed, she sings, her voice a melody of resolve. For we are here, and love is not measured by jewels, but by the heart that dares to hold it. What is legacy, if not the echo of choices that outlast the self? Beren feels the ring of Barahir still upon his left hand, its emerald, a faint gleam in the gloom. It is a legacy not of triumph, but of fidelity, of his father's courage, of Finrod's sacrifice, of a promise kept through shadow and flame. The Silmaril was to be his offering to Thingol, a bridge to Lúthien's hand. But now he sees that the true offering is their shared journey, the wounds they bear, the love that has carried them through the heart of evil. Lúthien's song weaves through his pain, not erasing it but cradling it, a reminder that love does not demand perfection but presence. She sings of Neldareth's glades, of the stars that still burn above, of a world that, though scarred, is not yet forsaken. Huan's low growl breaks the stillness, his ears pricked toward the south. The plain is not empty. Carcharoth, driven mad by the Silmaril's fire in his gut, roams the wilds, his howls a storm that shakes the earth. Beren's heart stirs, not with fear, but with a quiet resolve. The Silmaril is not lost, not yet, and though his body is frail, his spirit is alight with the memory of Lúthien's dance, of Finrod's song, of a love that has defied Morgoth's throne. We must follow. He murmurs, his voice faint but firm. Lúthien's eyes widen, her song faltering. You are wounded, she says, her voice a plea. This is not your burden alone. But Beren's gaze is steady, a mirror of her own resolve. It is ours, he says, and I will not let the shadow have the last word. The journey south is a trial of endurance, each step a defiance of pain. Lúthien supports Beren, her arm around his waist, her song a shield against despair. Huan leads his strides, sure, his senses attuned to the wolf's trail. The land they cross is scarred by war, its rivers choked with ash, its forests silent. Yet there are moments of grace, a stream that runs clear, a star that pierces the smog, a breeze that carries the scent of green things. Lúthien sings of these, her voice a tapestry of memory and hope, and Beren listens, his heart lifted, not by the promise of victory, but by the truth that beauty endures even in the shadow of Angband. What is hope, if not the refusal to let darkness define the song? As they track Carcharoth, hope is not a certainty, but a choice to believe that the Silmaril's light is not lost, that their love is not in vain. Beren feels this hope in Lúthien's touch, in the rhythm of her song, in the steady gaze of Huan's eyes. It is not a hope that denies pain, but one that embraces it, weaving it into the melody of their journey. The wolf's trail leads them to the borders of Doriath, to the enchanted woods where Thingol's power holds sway. Here the air is lighter, the stars brighter, but the shadow of Carcharoth is a stain upon the land, his madness a threat to all that is fair. The hunt is joined by others, Thingol's warriors, led by Mablung and Beleg, their bows drawn, their eyes grim. Thingol himself comes, his face a mask of pride and fear, for he knows now the depth of Lúthien's love, the peril she has faced for Beren's sake. Beren meets the king's gaze not as a beggar, but as a man who has walked through hell and returned. The Silmaril is near, he says, his voice raw but steady, and I will bring it to you as I swore. Thingol's eyes soften not with forgiveness, but with recognition of a love that defies his will, of a man who has borne the unbearable. The final stand comes in a glade by the river. Escalduin, its waters silver under the moon. Carcharoth bursts from the trees, his form a nightmare of fang and flame, the Silmaril's light burning through his flesh. Beren steps forward, his left hand gripping a spear, his body frail but his heart alight. Lúthien sings, her voice a command that slows the wolf's charge, but Carcharoth's madness is a tide, his jaws snapping. Huan leaps, his teeth sinking into the wolf's flank, and the glade erupts in a storm of fang and steel. Beren thrusts his spear, its point piercing Carcharoth's hide, but the wolf's claws rake his chest, a wound that spills his blood upon the earth. Lúthien's cry is a song of anguish and power, her hands weaving a spell that binds Carcharoth's spirit, forcing him to the ground. Huan's jaws close on the wolf's throat, and with a final howl Carcharoth falls, his body still, the Silmaril's light spilling from his torn belly. Mablung kneels, his knife cutting the jewel free, its radiance a star in his hands. But Beren lies in the grass, his breath fading, his eyes fixed on Lúthien. She kneels beside him, her song now a lament, a prayer that holds him to the world. "Stay," she sings, her voice breaking. "Stay, for I cannot sing without you." What is faith, if not the trust in a melody beyond the self? Beren's vision dims, but he feels Lúthien's hand, hears her song, sees the Silmaril's light. "I have kept my vow," he whispers, his voice a breath. "And you are my light." The glade is silent, the stars above unyielding, and Beren's spirit slips away, his body still in Lúthien's arms. Thingol kneels, his pride broken, the Silmaril in his hand, a hollow victory. Lúthien's song does not cease, but it changes, a melody of grief that pierces the heavens, a call to the powers that shape the world. Her sorrow is a force, a tide that carries her beyond the circles of Arda, to the halls of Mandos, where the spirits of the dead await. Here, in the silence of eternity, Lúthien stands before the doomsmen of the Valor, her voice a song of love and loss, a plea not for herself, but for Beren. "Let him live," she sings, "or let me follow, for I cannot be sundered from him." Her song is not a demand, but a gift, a surrender of her immortality, a choice to bind her fate to a mortal's span. Mandos, whose heart is stone, is moved for love such as this, is a note in the music of Ilúvatar, a truth that even death cannot unmake. What is love, if not the willingness to break for another? Lúthien's choice is not a triumph, but a revelation. Revelation of a love that transcends the laws of the world, that reshapes the song of creation. Mandos grants her plea, but with a cost. Beren will live, but Lúthien will become mortal. Her years fleeting, her light bound to the earth. She accepts her heart, a light with joy and sorrow, for to love Beren is to embrace both life and death, to sing a song that fades but does not end. They return to the world, their bodies restored, their hands entwined. The Silmaril is given to Thingol, not as a prize, but as a seal of their love, a light that shines in Doriath's halls. Beren and Lúthien dwell in the woods of Osirian, their lives a quiet melody, their love a fire that burns through the years. They do not seek glory, nor do they flee from pain. They live, and in their living they weave a song that echoes through the ages, a song of fear-faced burdens born, and a love that defies the dark. What does it mean to face the terrors of Angband? It is not to conquer, but to endure, not to claim light, but to carry it through shadow and flame, through loss and pain. Beren and Lúthien's journey is not a tale of heroes, but of souls, of a man and a maidens who dared to love in the face of despair. Their story fades not into silence, but into memory, a melody that lingers in the stars, in the rivers, in the hearts of those who hear their song. They are gone, but their light remains a testament to the truth that love is the fire that burns through all terrors, the song that no darkness can silence. Let us leave them now, not with answers, but with echoes of a ring that carries a promise, of a jewel that burns with hope, of a love that reshapes the world. Their tale is ours in its way, for we too walk through shadows bearing wounds we cannot heal, chasing lights we cannot hold. And like Beren and Lúthien, we are not alone, not if we dare to sing, not if we dare to love. The terrors of Angband are many, but the song of the heart is greater, a melody that fades into memory, but never into silence.